Yes, we're live now, yes.
Okay, so welcome everybody to the Avon Fire Authority. I will do my Zoom guidelines briefing so everybody knows exactly what we're doing. So welcome not only to members of the Avon Fire Authority, to officers of Avon Fire and Rescue Service, and also members of the public. So thank you very much.
Mine turns out that are quite,
Yes, we're live now, yes.
quite
So welcome everybody to the Avon Fire Authority. I will do my Zoom guidelines briefing so everybody knows exactly what we're doing. So welcome not only to members of the Avon Fire Authority, to officers. Why are we hearing this twice? Also members of the public. So thank you very much.
mine turns out that are quite
Okay, I'm going to try to start. So the Zoom guidelines, in view of the current restrictions that COVID-19 has placed on everybody, including the Fire Authority, this meeting of the Avon Fire Authority will take place using Zoom this afternoon. To ensure the meeting goes as smoothly as possible, there are several points and guidelines that I would run through with members and for the benefit of any members of the public that are watching the live stream of this meeting. Once the meeting begins, the attendees will be placed onto mute unless invited to speak by the chair of the meeting. If members wish to speak or have a question, may please indicate this by sending a message to Emma using the chat function. This will be monitored at the end of each item. There will be an opportunity for members to speak in turn. The open section of the Fire Authority meeting will be video recorded and live streamed to the Avon Fire Authority, Avon Fire and Rescue Service YouTube channel. By attending a meeting via Zoom, attendees are agreeing for their images and voice recordings to be posted. Due to the reduction in length of meetings, it is intended for reports provided for information noting a full discussion will not take place. Please keep any mobile phones on mute to avoid interruptions and interference with sound. Public access statements not be able to be presented at the meeting by the author, but will be received by the members and published along with the minutes of the meeting. There is a time limit of 30 minutes for public access. If I need to call a short comfort break, I will say how long that break will be for information to the attendees and those watching. The recording and live stream will remain running, but video images shall be turned off, as well as microphones remaining muted. On return from the break, video images should be switched back on again. Okay, so that's the public information section of the meeting. So we'll move on to item number 1, which is apologies for absence. Are there any? I believe Richard Tucker is unable to attend, and Richard Eddy and Celia Phipps. Have we received any others?
Not aware of.
Okay, fine, thank you. So I think what I will do is I will get all the members of the authority in turn to introduce themselves, so the members of the public know they are. I'm Don Davis, North Somerset Council and leader of North Somerset Council, also chair of Avon Fire Authority. John Ash.
Hello, I'm Councillor John Ash from Bradley Stoke, and I'm with South Gloucestershire District Council.
Shelley Bromley.
Sorry, Chair. I'm Lib Dem councillor for Western part of Bath and North East Somerset.
Thank you. And Neil Butters.
Good afternoon, Chair. I'm Councillor Neil Butters, Bath Avon South, Lib Dem, Bath and North East Somerset.
Thank you. Tony Davis.
Yeah, I'm Tony Davis, member for Doddington, which is in South Gloucestershire. Thank you.
Okay. Richard Eddy is absent, I understand. Paul Goggin.
Hi there, Councillor Paul Goggin, Bristol City Council.
Okay. Brian Hopkinson.
Good morning. Afternoon. District Councillor for Charlton Hayes and Cribs for South Gloucestershire.
Thank you. Ruth Jacobs. You're on mute, Emma, if you're trying to speak. Okay. I don't think Ruth's managed to join us as yet. Carol Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Councillor Carol Johnson, Labour Councillor for Ashley Ward in Bristol.
Thank you. Trevor Jones.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Trevor Jones.
Apologies. Yeah, Ruth Jacobs is about to join due to IT problems.
Okay. Sorry, Trevor.
That's okay. I'm Councillor Trevor Jones. I'm one of 2 councillors for Winterbourne Ward in South Gloucestershire.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. Councillor Carol Johnson, Labour Councillor for Ashley Ward in Bristol.
Okay. Sultan Khan.
Good afternoon. I'm Councillor Trevor Jones.
I think, Emma, it might be because you've got the muting, is it? I don't know.
That's okay. I'm Councillor Trevor Jones.
Okay, so Sultan Khan, Councillor for Eastville Ward, Lib Dem, Bristol City Council.
Okay. Cleo Lake.
Councillor Cleo Lake, Cotton Ward, Bristol.
Brenda Massey.
Good afternoon. My name is Brenda Massey. I'm Vice Chair of the Authority and I represent Southmead Ward in Bristol.
Adam Monk.
Good afternoon, Chair. Adam Monk, Filton, South Gloss Councillor representing Filton.
Paul Myers.
Councillor Paul Myers, Midsummer Norton Redfield, Bath and North East Somerset Council.
Robert Payne.
Robert Payne, Lib Dem Councillor for Western-super-Mare Central, North Somerset Council.
Thank you. Celia Phipps and Richard Tucker have both given their apologies. And Chris Windows. Okay, Chris Windows doesn't appear to have joined us as yet. Okay. And there are other people on the call. I'll ask the senior officers to introduce themselves. We have our Chief Fire Officer, Mick Crenell.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. Mick Crenell, I'm the Chief Fire Officer and Chief Exec.
He's not joined yet, I'm afraid, Don.
Okay, Simon Shilton.
Yes, good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, Chair. Simon Shilton, one of the Assistant Chief Fire Officers. Thank you.
Okay. Danielle Neal.
Good afternoon. I'm Danielle. I'm the Fire Authority Treasurer. Thank you.
Okay, David Daycock.
Good afternoon. Yes, David Daycock, Deputy Clerk and Monitoring Officer.
Okay, and we have Angela Feeney, who is now the Director of Corporate Services.
Afternoon, members.
And Amanda Brown, who is our new clerk.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. First day in post today. So David's going to be working alongside me initially, but I'm pleased to be in post.
Lovely, thank you. And Simon, I see a message has come about a technical problem we're having. Simon Shilton, would you like to make sure everybody knows about it?
Yes, if you're getting feedback, Emma, I think it's because if you're on Zoom and then watching YouTube at the same time, there's a time lag between the two. You know, you've got to, I guess, either mute the YouTube channel whilst also attending the Zoom meeting.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps, Chair.
Right, thank you. So,
watching YouTube at the same time, there's a time lag between the two. You know, you've got to, I guess, either mute the YouTube channel whilst also attending the Zoom meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, right. So emergency evacuation procedures. If you're in your own home, I suggest if there's a fire, ring 999 and get out. If you're in the fire premises, Chief Fire Officer?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think it's only staff that are in headquarters along with Amanda. So
okay.
Protocols are required.
If there's a fire, 399. Emma, it's still coming through. We want to declarations of interest item 3. I'm not advised of any declarations of interest. Are there any the members wish to make in relation to today's agenda? Okay. And now we move on to Chair's business. I have none, but I'm going to ask my Vice Chair, Brenda Massey, to give you an update on the Grenfell Tower work she's been doing with the Fire Commission. I think it's of great interest to us given the number of high-rise buildings we have within the Avon Fire and Rescue Service area. Brenda.
Thanks, Chair. There were actually 2 meetings. One was about Grenfell and one was from the Local Government Association, but I'll do the Grenfell one first. And I know Mick was there as well because I spotted him in the photos. So I stayed, not showing my photo, but I could see Mick all the time. So I'm sure he'll correct me if I've got anything wrong. So it was a really interesting session online. And it started off with, I think his name was Andy Rowe from the London Fire Commission, who provided the initial update. Lots of emphasis on the need for training, which will be in line with the report recommendations. All control officers trained on the national talk group, and control is now embedded into operational response. There's new training for high-rise fires, including evacuation and rescue, plus survival guidance. A new delivery plan includes training, leadership, engagement with communities, and a new assurance framework. Smoke hoods were mentioned quite a few times, and I wasn't sure what our position was on those, so it might be interesting to get feedback from Nick about that. The majority of fire and rescue services appear to be either already using them or intend to, with a very small minority who don't seem totally convinced at present. Procurement guidelines for smoke hoods are being produced. There were lots of comments about the impact a major incident can have on availability to deal with other smaller incidents, as so many pumps and firefighters can be tied up fighting large fires or dealing with major incidents. And Andy Burnham, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, spoke about the Cube incident in November last year. And there's actually a copy of the incident report available online, which I can give you the URL for if anybody's interested. Liverpool and Manchester have been backfilling for each other for large events, and because smaller local forces can't cope with the amount of equipment and firefighters needed. So they were saying a regional fire service works well in such situations. There were around 8,000 properties to be inspected initially post Grenfell, and out of around 458 buildings across the country needing remediation work as soon as possible, some of those have the same cladding as used on the Grenfell Tower. And after years of neglect, non-compliance with building regulation and corner cutting generally, there's still 100 that haven't had work started on them. Local authorities and fire and rescue services are working together to put pressure on for enforcement of building regulations. There were around 90 people on the course, so it was a really good attendance. And unfortunately, they haven't sent out a copy of the slides, as far as I'm aware. So I have asked if we can have a copy of those to look at. So that was the first meeting. I don't know if Mick needs to follow up with anything I've missed.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Yeah, as other services have nationally in terms of post Grenfell, we're 3 years on from Grenfell, and there's still quite a number of buildings in the UK that still needs remediation in terms of bringing them into line and actually taking those cladding systems away from those buildings and to restore them to a fire safe environment. We have one on our patch, and work is moving forwards with regards to the remediation with that particular premises. But what we have got in place is a good action plan, if you like, in terms of if we need to go, they have a wake and watch in place, we've got a good risk assessment in place, and so on and so on. So that premises is on our radar, and we're working towards making sure that that building is completely safe in the future. We have our own action plan post Grenfell, particularly with regards to the outcomes from the inquiry and the, phase 1 of the inquiry and the recommendations that come from that. Some of those are internal, which we're working on, and we're working gradually towards them. And I think we're making very good progress. Some of those are things like smoke hoods and so on and so on. Perhaps I'll give you an update with that in a moment. But some of them are also external, where we're working with local partners as well, local authorities, to work together to resolve those things. We can bring a further update. We have updated members previously with regards to where we are with this action plan. We can bring a further update and meeting in December, so that it gives members the reassurance that we're working towards these things. In terms of smoke hoods, I believe that we will be purchasing them. I believe we're going through that procurement process at the moment. And in the fullness of time and in the future, all of our frontline appliances will have smoke hoods on the appliances. And these are designed so that they enable a rescue from a property where a smoke hood can be issued to a casualty and to be taken out through a smoke-filled environment in a safe way. Yes, certainly we're in the process of that procurement. Conversation that went on with regards to reinforcing arrangements and supporting each other across border and in terms of services is something that's been in place for a long time. Certainly under the Fire and Rescue Services Act, Section 13 deals with reinforcing arrangements, and we have agreements with all of our bordering services where we can all back each other up if needed for large incidents. And certainly we do it around our borders anyway, in terms of cross-border mobilisations to assist each other. And certainly for major incidents, we rely on each other heavily in that regard. So those are already in place and have been for many years. And for your reassurance members, that works very, very well. So I think actually, I think that covers the areas that I would like to have added, Councillor, to what you said. Happy to obviously take any questions.
Thanks, Mick. Don, do you want to know about the LGA meeting as well?
Please.
Okay, that was on Friday, so it was a bit of a busy time with national meetings. And that was really a general update and discussion with local authority members from around the country. And it was really interesting to see how many people were there. But comments included the subject of the PCC review and lessons learned about working together. One issue that was mentioned was the fact that legally, police officers are not allowed to strike, and there was concern that PCCs might wish to impose the same condition on firefighters. Potential priorities for the coming year are people, concentrating on diversity and workforce development, professional, responding to inspections and safety and outcomes from the spending review, and transparency and standards plus governance, including learning from COVID-19. It isn't yet clear, or it wasn't then, I don't know if it's changed, but whether the spending review will go ahead, but it is likely. And a question was raised about whether fire and rescue can raise a preset like local authorities do. A member from Somerset said that low council tax banding for the majority of the population there meant a lack of funding. A question about the CFO pay claim was raised, saying that the extra cost was usually picked up by government and this needed to happen again. But the meeting on Monday about Grenfell Tower was mentioned, and a comment was made about permitted developments, which I know Cleo's just raised an issue on chat about it, and the conversion of buildings for alternative use and whether safeguards would be put in place. Post Grenfell, buildings over 18 metres high are being checked, but there is a financial problem with insurance for people who carry out the inspections, and also a lack of skilled people to do this. Planning applications for taller buildings shouldn't go through without an appropriate inspection and sign-off, and this is often a problem with converting buildings for student accommodation. So that's a very short summary of what we were talking about on Friday.
Thank you, Brenda. And now we'll move into the substantive parts of the meeting, everybody. Thank you. And just to remind you, we'll use the following voting procedures we have done in previous meetings. But I will first of all ask for any members who wish to vote against the motion, any abstentions, and then we will assume that the rest of the members there are voting for, and you indicate the against or the abstention by putting that in chat, which Emma will note. Thank you.
Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think Councillor Khan had a question earlier. He had his hand up.
Sultan.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Mick. I hope most of you know, but I just wanted to understand that in his target or his department target, how many of buildings in our authority and within our authority are in target, if he has any, in terms of the vulnerability of the buildings and so on.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. Thank you for the question. If we talk about the additional buildings that we need to inspect for from the high-rise buildings risk review programme, it was 186 premises that were highlighted to us, which are 18 metres plus. And those premises that are on our patch will be undertaking a full inspection of those premises between now and the end of 2021. That's been a request direct from MHCLG, from the Minister, for us to provide that assurance and that reassurance that we've inspected those premises and that they are not just in scope, but obviously safe. So we were undertaking that work, and we have received additional funding to support that additional work that we have to do. The rest of our building stock across all of our area are subject to what we would call a risk-based inspection programme. And what we do is we have an assessment of the risk of any particular building, and we give that a risk score and a risk rating. And what we do is we deploy our inspecting officers from our technical fire safety team to those buildings on a risk-based approach. So that is essentially what our risk-based inspection programme is about. So we visit our very high and high-risk premises, obviously more frequently than those that would be medium risk. So any building that comes under the regulatory reform fire safety order, which is what we have the enforcement requirements and statutory duty to provide, will come under that risk-based inspection programme regime. So that is a programme that's ongoing, and what we will do over the next few years, next couple of years, is to fully revisit that risk-based inspection programme to make sure that we are visiting the right premises at the right time, with the right resources, and to make sure that they're obviously safe for members of the public.
So thank you for that. But very quickly, what I wanted to understand is that, do you have, or if you have, the number of buildings in the risk priority number 1 or 2 in that category? How many of them?
Yes, this is from memory. And perhaps Pete Davies might be able to help me in without putting you under pressure, Pete. But I believe we've got 41 premises that are in the very high category, and something like 4,600 premises in the high category, 4,664. But please don't quote me on that. But I think that's the sort of quantum that we're talking about.
Okay, and of course, with those 41 that in the high risk category, you are, taking the precautions that needed to be taken.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go on to item 5 of the agenda, which is the minutes of the ordinary meeting. I'd like to propose that we accept those as a true record of the last meeting. Do I find a seconder?
Sorry, Chair. Can I come in on that?
Go on.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
It's just a typo on page 5 where we refer to urgent action understanding order 5.1. It should be 4.1. So if that could be amended, Chair.
Okay. So with that one modification, do I find a seconder for the minutes? Councillor Tony Davis, thank you. Do we have any votes against acceptance? Can you see any, Emma? Do we have any abstentions? Okay, thank you. I count that as passed. Item 6 is public access. There is none. Therefore, item 7.1 is the ordinary meeting of the PRSC committee on the 31st of January. I move to Councillor Tony Davis on that one, please.
No, I don't.
You're muted, Tony.
Right, I'm unmuted now.
Okay.
I think that it's fairly self-evident and just take questions if anybody's got a question on them. If not.
Okay, if not, can we have a seconder for them, please, from your committee?
I'll second it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. So we'll put that to the vote. Is there anybody against acceptance? Is there anybody abstaining? Okay, I'll take that as passed, and thank you. 7.2, which is the ordinary meeting of the Audit, Governance and Ethics Committee from May. Councillor Paul Goggin, the chair. Can you move those, please, Paul?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll move those and take any questions if there are any.
Okay, and we need a seconder.
I'll do that, Chair.
Thank you very much. That's Trevor. Thank you, Trevor Jones. Okay. I don't see any questions in chat. Therefore, any votes against acceptance? Any abstentions? Thank you, colleagues. That's passed. And we move on to item number 8, which is on the on your papers, which is the 2021 Revenue and Capital Finance Monitoring Report, which our Treasurer, Danielle Neal, I believe, is going to present. Over to you, Danielle, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll kick off, and then if there are any detailed queries later, we've got Lynn on hand to help members with those detailed queries. So thank you, Lynn. Just to give you an intro, the results that we have today for revenue and capital are to the end of August 2020. So I'm really pleased to say those are the latest financial results, so hot off the press. So hopefully this is informing members of the latest forecast position that we have. If I could start with the revenue position. This is outlined in Appendix 1 of the members' papers. And we have a revenue year-end forecast position of 169,000, which equates to around 0.33% of the annual budget. So that's a very small underspend in terms of the organisational financial resources. The underspend largely on the revenue budgets relates to non-pay, and the two main areas of underspend relate to supplies and services of 118,000 and transport costs of 79,000. So if I could move on to the next part of the paper. Appendix 3 outlines the additional income that the Fire Authority has received from April, and we now provide regular updates to our directors meeting and SLT. And we also have on there the summary of budget variance, which we are asked to gain approval for the Fire Authority. Moving on, I've provided a brief update on the Finance Improvement Programme. Some members are more involved in this than others, so I've been working closely with the Chair, more recently the Vice Chair, and Paul as our AJAC Chair. This is a plan to strengthen some key areas of the finance function. Key areas such as financial reporting, finance business partnering, capital accounting, and business cases. So this would be the financial appraisal and modelling of business cases. We've started work on that over the few weeks. Things are progressing well, but there is a significant amount of work to work through until the year end. And ultimately, we're hoping to move towards a devolved budgetary framework, which will give managers across the service much more flexibility to manage their budgets. I've agreed that updates will be provided to the AJAC committee through the AJAC chair, and I'm happy, Don, to provide updates if that would be helpful in my finance papers moving forward. Lastly, if I could bring your attention to the capital budget. This is shown on Appendix 4. Out of our annual budget of around just over £12 million, our operational leads are forecasting a projected underspend or slippage into future years of just over £2 million. This equates to roughly 17.6% of that annual budget. And largely, members can see the areas of underspend or slippage are largely on premises, Bedminster refurbishment, fleet, and the ICT transformation budget. I would draw attention to the table that I've shared. What I've agreed to do with the lead director in future reports is to show the ICT digitalisation, between ICT and transformation, because there are two separate, although they're closely linked. I've been asked by the lead director to show those separately, and I'm happy to do that if that makes sense for members. If there's any further questions, happy to take them, and obviously would welcome the support of director leads on the capital slippage areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle, and thank you very much for the update on the improvement plan. I do think that we've all agreed that there is some key work to be done within that department, and also thank you for the comments around the capital programme, again, which members have been concerned about for a while. There are various recommendations to put to the vote. Before that, is there anybody wishing to speak? I'm looking on the chat. Robert Payne.
Thank you. Yeah, I wonder if I could ask about the early repayment of the deferred capital receipt for the sale of the HQ. I wonder if there's any more information that we've got on why it was actually paid early, because it seems to me that it was contrary to the agreement that the authority made about how that was going to be paid, or was that an option within the agreement? I'm not sure. The reason I ask is because in the low interest environment that we are, it seems that we are quite a bit worse off by holding on to that money. I think we've lost something like £63,000, whereas we're getting nothing at all as returns from the funds that we're holding.
Thank you. I'm happy to kick off, but then I'll refer to Lynn and or Mick because it predates my employment with the Fire Authority. My understanding is that there was a general concession about a period in time whereby the repayment could be made. And my understanding is that in terms of budget setting, an assumption was made in terms of when that might be. Obviously, there was no definitive date as in it has to be paid back in June of 2020. I understand that there was a period agreed for which that repayment could be made. And my understanding, but as I said, I'll refer to Lynn in a second, is that an assumption was made in budget setting that it would be halfway through the financial year, and it's actually been paid a few months earlier. Lynn, is there anything else that you'd like to add on that? Lynn, we can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
Interesting, because I don't think Lynn is actually muted, but we can't hear her. But I would echo.
Sorry, Mick, it might have been just to say around the history of this, Robert, is that when we sold the premises, we agreed to take the payment of the capital payment for the purchase of land in 2 parts. And part of the incentive for us to do that was to have this interest. But there was a discussion, I think, around the repayment, and we felt that the cash in the bank account of the fire authority was the safest place for it to be, given the current financial climate in which we find ourselves. So I think there was a concern about us pushing for a small interest payment, but the risk of then having protracted difficulty in extracting the much larger capital sum. And I think we were of the opinion that we felt more comfortable with the money in our direct control, given the capital program we have moving forward. Does that summarise where you thought we were, Mick?
Yes, it was, Chairman, absolutely. Lynn is now relocated. I think she can...
Hello. Yes, I wasn't muted, but I don't know what's going on with my computer. I'll have to sort that out later. Yes, I don't know I didn't hear what Mick said, but the arrangement was that it was to be repaid 5 years after the initial completion date, or at any time before. And when we set the budget for 2021, the interest rate was 2% above base. So base at the time was, I think, 0.75%. So we thought base rate would go up rather than down. So we calculated that it might be repaid about halfway through the year, because they had made overtures to repay it. But obviously, when COVID happened, the base rate went down as well. So it was we wouldn't have got, even if it hadn't been repaid, we wouldn't have got the higher amount of interest. We would have had a hit on the interest, because we would have lost 0.65% of interest.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. So I can't see any other questions in chat. So I was going to ask there are 3 decisions to be made. I was going to ask we do it en bloc and seek a proposer. Is that you, Shelley Bromley, indicating proposal? Yes, you're happy to propose? I'm not sure. Were you proposing that we accept these recommendations, Shelley?
I can do if you want. Yes, sorry, I wasn't.
That's lovely, thank you.
That's fine, I will do, yeah.
Thank you. And a seconder?
Sorry.
We got a seconder for the proposal?
I think Paul's got his hand up, Chair.
Has he? Paul Goggins, thank you. So are there any votes against acceptance of these recommendations? Are there any abstentions? Okay, thank you, colleagues. I accept those as passed, and we now move on to item number 9, which is the review of the independent person allowances. And Dave Daycock, I think, is going to lead on this for us.
Yep, thank you, Chair. I'll try and keep this as brief as possible. As members are presumably aware from their own constituent authorities, under the Localism Act 2011, each authority has to have an independent person that can be utilised in the event of a complaint being made about the conduct of members under the relevant code of conduct for that authority. They act as a sounding board as to whether a matter should be investigated, and they also act as a sounding board as well as to decisions being made and appropriate sanctions, in my understanding. So it's a legal requirement that public authorities have an individual such as an independent person to act on their behalf in appropriate circumstances. The fire authority did have an independent person duly appointed back in something like 2018, I think it was. But unfortunately, that individual had to step down as they were precluded from continuing in the role by virtue of being related to a member of the authority. So regrettably, we had to part company at that particular point. We then embarked upon an exercise to recruit a replacement. The salary or the fee that was offered was £250 per annum. We went out to advert at least on one occasion, and my recollection is it was probably twice. We had no interest whatsoever. It was felt, looking around at other authorities, that we are probably paying below the market rate. But in any event, whichever way you cut it up, we certainly weren't attracting people who were interested in becoming an independent person for Avon Fire Authority. So the report really seeks members' agreement to up the payment from £250 to £1,000 per annum. That's not just a one-off payment. That then would be linked to delivering training, attending meetings, generally being proactive within the authority, even if there were no complaints made. And I'm sure you will all behave yourselves, so hopefully we won't have any complaints made against you, but certainly we need to have this role of independent person. So really what the report is seeking is for members to agree to this. The £1,000 is probably what is being paid by other authorities. We have had a look around at the relevant salaries being paid there, and we feel that hopefully we can then go out to advert for that and get an independent person appointed. The appointment itself will be at the behest of members, and hopefully we'll get a good quality candidate who can then step up to the plate and fulfill that particular role. The other alternative members might want to consider is to link it to some sort of hourly rate. But I think experience tells us that a headline figure will then get people in, and then you link that to some sort of performance, which I trust you will delegate either to myself or to the incoming clerk or the new clerk to make sure that they do actually deliver value for money. So really that's the essence of the report before you, members. I'm happy to take any questions, and hopefully we can move on in this particular issue as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I mean, it's a sad loss of Sally, but we did gain a firefighter, so I guess the net benefit was even. So are there any questions, please, on this? There are 3 decisions for us to make.
Councillor Hopkinson.
Councillor Brian Hopkinson.
Councillor Hopkinson.
Brian?
Okay. Yeah, I was quite involved with the Standards Committee in South Gloucestershire when it actually was formed in the first place, when the government decided this was something which had to happen. And it is important that we get somebody that is roughly commensurate with, I think, what South Gloucestershire pay for the for a member, and I think actually incorporating that member to do other functions within, you know, the authority is a really good one. I haven't really got any questions, but I was putting my hand up to propose that we go ahead with this. I can't really see any problem with this, and I think the due diligence has been done to afford the conclusion which you've come to.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
We've got a proposition to accept those recommendations. Do we have a seconder for that?
Yes, Neil, I'll second.
Okay, Neil Butters seconding. Is there any further debate? Can you pick anything up, Emma?
Can I just ask a question, Chair?
Yeah, go on, Carol.
Yeah, I just, if we don't get any complaints, which we hope we don't, are there further aspects to this role that someone will be fulfilling for the money that we're paying them?
If I can come in on that, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so we hope you don't get any complaints against anyone, but we would be requiring the candidate to involve in training of members as well, in conjunction with the monitoring officer. And it's likely it'll be quite a lively area, because I think there's going to be a reform of standards regime in England coming down the line. And we'd also expect them to attend meetings as a sort of a critical friend as well, to give feedback to members on issues of probity and governance. So certainly it wouldn't be a case of just giving money for nothing. They would be expected to fulfill a training role, and also be proactive in helping and advising members in conjunction with the monitoring officer.
Thank you.
Indeed, Carol, I don't know if you recall, but our previous independent person was regularly at the Fire Authority meetings and at our training sessions as well. So that will be the expectation of the new appointee. And of course, we're all whiter than white, so it's very unlikely they'll have an actual complaint to consider under the current authority.
Could I ask a question, Chair?
Please.
Could I ask a question?
Please.
were paying less than most authorities. What is the average pay for this position?
Can I come back on that? I can't give you an average. I certainly looked around and I felt it was between £1,000 and £1,500, I think, were the figures. Some of them linked it to an hourly rate as well.
Oh, that's okay. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay. Robert Payne?
Yeah, I was just wondering where or how widely the previous adverts were made, and I'm wondering if that had something to do with the fact that we haven't been able to attract anybody up to now.
I might have to call Emma in on this, but I think we contacted all the constituent authorities in the area and their monitoring officers to canvass individuals that they knew. We also advertised it. I think we advertised it online and on the authorities' website itself. So there's quite a good penetration. What you don't want, well, you might want these days, is to get someone from the north of England to play in as well. So, you know, we could throw the net a little bit wider now, certainly with the freeing up of, due to COVID, of the ability to conduct proceedings remotely. So, yeah, we will try to spread the net as widely as possible, but I can't tell you exactly where the previous adverts went.
And it was a while ago, wasn't it? So it's not.
Chair, would it be helpful for the advert to go out to the councillors so that we can circulate it throughout, you know, as widely as possible? Help you to do that?
Yes.
Yeah, that would be great, Chair. Yeah.
Thank you, Carol. Okay, is Sultan Khan's got his hand up?
So how many sort of roughly hours this person has to give, or how many meetings he or she had to attend for this? I suppose this £1,000 is for a year.
Yes.
Yeah, yes, that's my understanding, Chair. Obviously, we would expect them to attend all the fire authority meetings themselves, plus we would expect them to be involved in training, so a specific session on that. There may be two, depending upon the development of the standards regime in England. And obviously, in the worst case scenario, there may well be a complaint against members, in which case that takes us into a different dynamic, because you then have to convene meetings of a standards committee or a panel to look at that. And again, we would consult with the independent person at every stage of that particular process. So part of it we can nail down and say, yes, you need to attend X, Y, and Z meetings, but part of it is a contingency based upon basically whether you have complaints against members of the authority.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I may be wrong, but I'm a bit puzzled with this. A person has to give number of hours, you know, and a year. I believe it would be somewhere between 30 plus or more than that. Or I don't know, we have almost 4 or 5 meetings a year and different meetings and so on. How does it justify like £1,000 remuneration for this person for years?
Well, again, I can only say it's based upon what other authorities are paying, and the fact that we haven't got anybody applying for the previous role when it was £250. You could split the difference. It's up to members, but it was felt that on a rough analysis, £1,000 was a reasonable fee for a role of this job. And again, you need to have someone of some standing and experience to fulfill this requirement. You don't want just anybody. You need good quality applicants to make sure that they apply the correct processes to any complaints that are made against members.
That's it. So good quality applicant. That's another caveat. Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Chief Fire Officer put his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, really useful comments and good conversation, councillors. We have found as a service that the actual employment market and recruitment market at this moment in time is considerably different to what it was a few months ago. So I dare say if we do land this in the right places, that we will get a good quality applicant, because I do think that the job market has changed quite significantly in terms of the number of good applicants that we're having for all of the roles that we're undertaking.
Okay, so we've got a proposer and a second for this. Can I put it to the vote? Are there any against?
Sorry, Chair, I believe Councillor Davis was wanting to contribute.
Okay, Tony Davis.
Thank you, Tom. Could I just say that a very quick comment? You get what you pay for. And to be quite honest, anybody who's worth their salt won't get out of their bed for £1,000 a year. Sorry, that's maybe me being a bit blunt, but I think that's true.
Okay. So with that caveat, shall we go to the vote? Are there any voting against? Have we got any abstentions? Okay, can I take that as passed then? Thank you, colleagues. Now we move on to item number 10, which is the HMIC FRS, and I think Pete Davis is going to introduce this for us. Is that right, Peter?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Good afternoon, members. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Pete Davis. My role is responsible for liaison with my counterpart at Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, otherwise abbreviated to HMIC FRS, but even that's a bit of a mouthful. So in my report, if I do abbreviate still further to HMIC or even to HMI, at least you know what I'm talking about. This paper is the first on today's agenda, which is for members' information, and members are asked simply to note the contents of the report for their information. And I'll just take a canter through the paper to pick out the salient points. It is really to update members on current and future inspection activity by HMIC FRS. And we're currently in the middle of a fairly concentrated period of inspection activity, as I'll explain. Members will recall that after the first full round of inspections by HMIC FRS of English Fire and Rescue Services, they published in the back end of 2019 a consultation on their inspection framework for the second round of full inspections. That was all passed and agreed, and Avon Fire and Rescue Service was placed into tranche 1 of 3 tranches for the second round of inspection, which was progressing quite nicely at the very beginning of 2020. We had arranged our engagement activity with representatives from HMIC FRS to come in and get to know the service in advance of round 2. And as you'll see in section 3.5 of the report, we've done quite a bit of work up until about March in order to get ready for that second full round of inspection activity, which was to essentially assess our direction of travel from the recommendations and outcomes of round 1. Unfortunately, as we all know, the world rather changed in about March of 2020. And as you'll see in section 3.4, HMIC FRS suspended inspection activity across both the policing and the fire and rescue service portfolios until further notice in the middle of March. So all of that work that we'd done in preparation for round 2 was then put on hold indefinitely, pending developments in the COVID-19 pandemic. Obviously, our focus was mainly on responding to the challenges of the pandemic in the next few months. But then on the 7th of July, HMI Zoe Billingham wrote to all services to update us on their plans to reinvigorate their inspection programme. And it came in a number of sections, really. The first was the Home Secretary had commissioned HMIC FRS to undertake a thematic inspection of fire and rescue services to look at their response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the challenges which it produced, and indeed still produces, and the learning coming out of our response so far. HMI Billingham also indicated that the twice yearly routine data requests would be reactivated, and also that there would be a piece of work to be undertaken between the end of the COVID-19 thematic inspection and the full restart of round 2 inspections to follow up on causes of concern resulting from round 1. So that brings us really to the current activity, which is focused on the COVID-19 thematic inspection. And over the last few weeks, we've had a really intense period of activity, supplying HMI with a number of inspection elements, including additional data related to our COVID-19 activity, a survey for all fire and rescue services to fill in, submitting additional documents related to our response to the pandemic, and also they conducted a survey of our staff about how they felt during the last few months. That detail is summarised in Table 1 under Section 3.9 of the report. That brings us to the current position where next week we have a number of virtual interviews with key officers and managers within the service with HMI. They're summarised in 3.10 of the report, and that will be the last element of that thematic inspection for Avon Fire and Rescue Service, with HMI then planning to provide an individual service letter with a narrative assessment rather than graded judgments looking at our response to COVID-19, and indeed a national report summarising all English fire and rescue services response to the pandemic, to be published hopefully by the end of the calendar year. And of course, I think in general, it would be fair to say it's a very positive story, and it's a good story for English fire and rescue services to tell in terms of the response and support that we've given to fellow partner agencies and indeed to our communities. Apart from the COVID-19 thematic inspection and moving to section 3.13 of the paper, the HMI also reactivated its routine twice yearly data requests. So we've been busy working on those, and we have recently heard that the next data request is due to be received in the week commencing the 26th of October. Once the COVID-19 thematic inspection is complete, HMI will be following up on causes of concern resulting from round 1. Although we don't know the specific detail of how they want to do that, we suspect that it will be still a virtual inspection activity, and the details, the precise details of that, remain to be seen. You'll be aware that Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, that's Sir Tom Windsor, is statutorily required to publish an annual State of Fire and Rescue report. So the HMI's intention is to do that very early in the new year, looking back on the 2020 year. We understand that that will be somewhat shorter than the first edition, which was published back in January of this year. And of course, we wait to hear what Sir Tom thinks of the State of Fire and Rescue in this year. That then brings us up to section 3.21 of the report, which will then launch us into the full round 2 inspections, whereby we've already got the consulted and approved framework for that. That won't change. And effectively what it means is that the pandemic has delayed that full round 2 by effectively 12 months. Confirmed, but I suspect that we will still be in tranche 1. We understand that HMI might jing the tranches. I suspect we'll probably remain in tranche 1, and that will be another set of activity as we move into the new year. So with that, Chair, the report is as presented for noting, but happy to take any questions if members have them.
Thank you, Peter. And just to comment to members, I did write to the HMI CRFRS Zoe Billingham asking whether it was appropriate for some to divert resource in a pandemic for data collection on something that isn't yet sorted out. And given the the current spike that seems to be occurring in COVID-19. Sadly, we don't see anywhere near controlling it. And I think I was very concerned that our eye was being taken off the ball, but to no avail, sadly, that we are being asked to go through this process, which I shall be being asked questions next week as well. Do we have questions? I've got, I think, Neil Butters, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, there's a huge amount of excellent work being done, but do we have a sense of where we are in any kind of national, perhaps it's call it pecking order, but you know what I mean, you know, are we up there with the mainstream as far as we know, or are we lagging behind in any particular areas that we're aware of?
Are we talking about our response to COVID-19?
Well, both actually. Now you come to mention it. Yes, both.
Well, I think in general the response to COVID-19, as I mentioned, it feels to me as if it's a very good news story in terms of the work that fire and rescue services have done to alter their methods of delivery such that they are still delivering their statutory functions, as well as supporting partner agencies. And I think I'll probably highlight in particularly their fire and rescue service support to ambulance services and coroner services across the country under the auspices of what's called the tripartite agreement. So the Fire Brigades Union, the National Fire Chiefs Council and the national employers very quickly came together to agree a set of additional activities which were approved for fire and rescue services to contribute to. And that has been a real success story for Avon Fire and Rescue Service, our fellow services across the southwest region, and indeed across England. But perhaps the Chief might want to comment on that further.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Pete. Pete, thank you for the work that you do in terms of liaison with HMI CFRS, because I think you do an outstanding job for us. I'm embarrassed in front of everybody, but I think you do an amazing job for us. To answer your question, Councillor, you know, I think it's a very good story to tell in terms of our response to COVID-19, and I think that the narrative report that will come from the inspection will be positive, and certainly we're doing everything that was been, you know, in terms of comparative to other services, we're doing very similar to a lot of other services. In fact, we've probably gone a step further in certain places in terms of support to our communities. So I'm fully expecting that narrative report to be a positive one. To answer your question around other areas, our first inspection obviously was challenging in certain areas, and we did put an action plan in place. We are making very steady progress in terms of that action plan, and actually we're in a strong place with that regard. And you know, depending on whether COVID or not, you think about the indicators about where we currently are. The second round of inspections may well be delayed again, but depending on where we are. But even if it wasn't, for me, I welcome, and actually I expect in the spring next year, if COVID notwithstanding, that we'll be in a much stronger place than we were, you know, prior to our first report and the outcome of our first inspection. I absolutely expect us to be in a much stronger place than we were previously.
Thank you very much. Just as you mentioned the duration of COVID, are you working on a 6-month horizon, or do you think it's still pretty unclear as to whether it'll be finished by the end of next year even?
So I think Councillor, if I knew the answer to that, I'd probably have to well. But yeah, probably are working on 6-month horizons at this moment in time.
Thank you.
No, we haven't found the vaccine yet, Neil.
Indeed.
No, much as we've tried. Any other questions, comments? Let's see if I can find any hands or chat. Okay, this is for noting. Are we happy to note? Is anybody not happy to note it? Any abstentions? Okay, this report is noted. Thank you, colleagues. We now move on to item 11. Dave Daycock on the update on the application of the PCC to join the Fire Authority.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Yep, fine. Members will recall that I wrote on behalf of members to the Lord Greenhall, the Fire Minister, back in June of this year, setting out concerns that members had raised regarding the appointment of the PCC to the Fire Authority. We did finally get a response from Lord Greenhall, I think on the 24th of this month. That letter has now, I think, been sent to you and been put on the notice board or whatever it's called, Blackwood or whatever. So members should be aware of that. But if they haven't, then we'll certainly make sure that they get a copy of the letter itself. But what I'll do, Chair, if it's okay with you, just briefly give a synopsis of the responses given by Lord Greenhall. Firstly, regarding the term of office, if you like, of the PCC on the Fire Authority itself. Not absolutely clear, the response, but basically what it is said is that the representation on a Fire Authority will extend for their current term, and a newly elected PCC may wish to consider governance options available to them. I'm not 100% clear about that, whether it means once you've appointed a PCC, that continues and the new incumbent will then follow through, or do they need to make a separate application? It may be we want to go back to get some clarification on that, but certainly I don't think it's quite as full as answer that perhaps we were anticipating there. The second issue was about reciprocal arrangements to allow members of the Fire Authority to vote on the Police and Crime Panel, which is a different entity from the PCC themselves. It's a sort of a watchdog body, if you like, to govern or to scrutinise the actions of the PCC. The answer to that was that each local authority in the area can nominate representatives to the panel, and that is therefore a matter for local determination. So in other words, putting the ball firmly back in the court of the constituent authorities. If they wish to have anyone on the Fire Authority to be able to scrutinise what the PCC is doing, then they can use that mechanism to get representation on the Police and Crime panel. But there's also a facility for the Police and Crime panel to have 2 co-opted members, so they could go over above that route to get 2 co-opted members from the Fire Authority. So again, that is something that we might wish to explore with the Police and Crime panel. Thirdly, what about regular attendance on the Fire Authority? What happens, for example, if the Police and Crime Commissioner just didn't bother turning up? What could be done about it? Lord Greenhall in the Home Office said, well, that's really a matter for the for the Fire Authority. There are no specific sanctions there, and as members will recall, there are no sanctions available to the Fire Authority other than writing to the Police and Crime panel saying we're not happy with the behaviour of the PCC in not attending, and leaving them then to call the PCC to account for that failure to attend on the Fire Authority. The fourth element related to expenses for attending the Fire Authority, and the Home Office said that they would expect those to be met by the Police and Crime Commissioner themselves. So that's a clear response on that particular one. The fifth question was again about behaviour, if you like, of the PCC, and the advice and the answer was that that would be governed by the Fire Authority's Code of Conduct. So if there was a breach, that will be dealt with under the procedures set out under the Fire Authority Code. But there's an interesting debate on this amongst the legal advisors, the monitoring officers, called the Fire Lawyers Network. Apparently someone has found some obscure clause which says that they would have to actually refer this as well to the Police and Crime panel. So not quite the simple answer as that as we might otherwise think, but hopefully an issue that won't be relevant to most Police and Crime Commissioners. The last one was the term of office. The response was, well, it's a 4-year term, but there's no limit on how many terms they can serve. So accordingly, they can, in theory, be serving on the Fire Authority for as long as they are Police and Crime Commissioner, but that would butt up against our own constitution, which will provide for a restriction on 8 years. And I'll mention this later on in our constitutional review. So again, perhaps a little bit of negotiations or a little bit of clarity perhaps we need to achieve in relation to that. One final point to make before I throw it open for members to ask me any questions is that Lord Greenhall then finished off by saying that he felt that the government wanted to see greater ambition in emergency services in collaboration and would welcome further consideration of our applications to join fire authorities by the PCC. So I think the government obviously keen to see collaboration between fire authorities and police and crime commissioners. I should also mention at this stage that I think I was tasked to go off and liaise with the clerk to Devon and Somerset Fire Authority on a couple of issues and their experience. I wasn't quite able to do this as well as I'd like because I don't know if members are aware, but I had a hip replacement 2 weeks ago, so I've been slightly out of the loop. But Amanda, who's come in now as the new monitoring officer, very kindly undertook this on my behalf. And I'll just give you a brief version of the response she had, but I'm more than happy if Amanda wishes to come in to further expand on these points. But basically, she spoke with the clerk to Devon and Somerset Fire Authority. They're up and running with this. They've had both of their constituent PCCs on their fire authority, but they're not holding any meetings. They're not like us. They haven't had any physical meetings. The only role that has been undertaken is apparently in relation to a members forum that they have, which is not a decision-making body whatsoever. And apparently it's only the Avon Sue Mount Stevens has actually attended and engaged in that. The other PCC for Devon and Cornwall has not yet been involved in it. So really, to cut a long story short, the clerk there felt it was far too early to give any feedback. They haven't got any meaningful experience of the role of the PCC to give any feedback to ourselves as to how things are working out, other than, and this is a personal view of the clerk, they felt that generally the participation was positive, and they felt that good would come from it. Finally, just to say that my view on this is that we collate this information and bring a report to members at a future fire authority, probably an EGM that we could convene, basically setting out the letter, the response from the Home Office, inviting further representations from the PCC for the final decision to be made, and also for you as members, if you've got any further queries or questions, to try to articulate those so we can actually get everything watertight so that a final decision can then be made at the next available meeting of the Fire Authority, either before the December meeting or at the December meeting itself. I'm more than happy to take any questions. And again, if Amanda wishes to come in and further elucidate on her conversations with the clerk at Devon and Cornwall, or Devon and Somerset, I'm more than happy for her to do that. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Dave, and thank you for your input, Amanda. Before we go into any formal questions, we don't have a substantive motion in front of us today. Therefore, I would prefer we didn't have a debate on something we can't decide upon. And as Dave Daycock has suggested, you will be bringing a paper to a future meeting. We'll try to have that as quickly as we can. Therefore, I would prefer questions only on points of accuracy and information rather than a full debate on whether we are going to have the PCC onto the Fire and Rescue Authority. So with that caveat, I think I've got Paul Goggin and Shelley Bromley down, and Amanda's also indicated she wishes to speak as well. Can I go to Paul Goggin first?
Thanks, Chair. Dave, first off, I hope you're feeling a bit better. Not on too many painkillers. Yeah, it's regarding the just a point of clarity, really. So the acceptance of the PCC onto the Fire Authority would be for each and every new PCC there was. And if we were to accept, as I said, as Don said, I won't go into any kind of debate about that. But if we were to accept, I'm presuming that we'd then have to go through it all again next May, as I don't think Sue Mount Stevens is standing again. Is that correct?
Thank you. That is certainly my reading of it, but I may be wrong. So again, I can send the letter to members. They can look at it, and we can if it's not clear, we can write back to Lord Greenhill and say, can you just clarify that point?
Okay.
Thanks, Dave.
Shelley.
Thank you, Chair. I know this is a sort of bit of a. I know you've all discussed this before, but I just wondered what the main advantage was to having the PCC a member of the Fire Authority. I'm not really sure, but I'm a new member, so you've all discussed this probably already. So apologies, yeah. Dave, I don't know if you could.
Shall I answer that? It's a legal requirement that
Right.
well, that there's a facility for them to apply, and we have to consider any application made. And obviously, the PCC has applied, so it's a legal obligation upon
Right.
the Fire Authority to consider that matter.
Okay, I understand. Thank you, Dave. Thank you.
And if we decide to refuse, we have to give an argued case to the Home Office to explain why we have refused.
Right. Okay. Thanks for clarifying. Thank you.
Okay. Amanda.
Yep.
Hi members, the only thing I wanted to add was the Home Office are carrying out a review at the moment about the success of the role of the PCC going forward. And I checked the Home Office website yesterday, and apparently that report is expected to be issued next month, October, so quite imminent. The tone on the Home Office website was very much, we want greater collaboration. We see this as a good thing. So the tone, if you read their page, is very much, they like this to happen. But I agree with Dave, if we can put a detailed paper together, consider any members' concerns and make sure we deal with all of those, and we can have a proper informed discussion and make a decision. And also by then we will have the benefit of that report, which I think should be very helpful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Was there anybody else that wished to speak? I don't know if I can pick anybody up.
No, I don't think so.
Anybody else in chat? Okay. Well, this was a report. I think we just note the fact. Thank Dave and Amanda for their updates, and this will be a substantive item at the next meeting we hold for decision. And I think I will stop there. Item 12, this is the Constitution Review, a verbal update again from Dave Daycock.
Thank you, Chair. Again, can all members hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Very briefly, a meeting was held of the Constitution Review Task and Finish Group, was held on the 10th of September, so relatively recently. There was a number of issues dealt with. We've minuted these, and these can be circulated to members if they wish. But in essence, a number of issues were dealt with. Firstly, that we are now going to formally incorporate into the Constitution a restriction on the term of office for 8 years in total for members, other than the chair, who is a restricted role of 6 years already under the Constitution. So it's felt that demonstrates churning up of the authority and preventing it sort of stultifying and becoming moribund, that you have fresh blood coming into the authority on a fairly regular basis. Secondly, and again, Danielle might wish to come in on this, there is quite an urgent need now to revamp and renew the rules relating to procurement. And I think that Danielle is working with Tanya Nathan to bring a paper to the next meeting, which I think is tomorrow actually, and to move on with this as quickly as possible with a view to bringing a final report to the Fire Authority in December. Again, do you want to come in now, Danielle, or do you want to just leave it at that?
I'm happy to leave it at that, because obviously Angie, as Director of Corporate Services, is the lead for procurement. So I understand Angie is working with Tanya, and obviously I'll link into that for any financial issues. Thanks, Dave.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so and Angie will be involved in it. So it's a multilateral approach, if you like, in terms of updating the Constitution there. And I'm sure Amanda will be involved as well, fully in that process. There's another issue then relating on to delegated powers to the Chief Fire Officer to deal with ill health retirements. Again, that will be subject to a further report to the working group, probably a little bit down the line. I'm in liaison with colleagues in this Fire Lawyers Network about that issue. And again, I hope to involve Amanda in that, so that we can then avail the Fire Authority of best practice to make sure we're up to date with the best way of dealing with ill health retirements as and when they occur. Last couple of bits and bobs, the AJEC terms of reference. I understand that Councillor Goggin in particular has some issues that he would like to feed in on, so that will presumably be coming down the line. And I think also Danielle as well will be involved in looking at the finance role of AJEC as well, to make sure that that is fit for purpose, and also dovetails with the second item here on the PRSC terms of reference as well, to make sure that there's an effective coverage of finance issues between those two particular committees themselves. So both of those issues will be dealt with as part of the ongoing work of the constitutional reform group itself. One other issue was the PCC issue. Well, we've already had feedback on that, so that is moving on. And again, we fully intend to involve members in that. The other issue was the pensions board or the pensions panel terms of reference. Well, that's already been dealt with. That's gone to the fire authority. So that, as far as I'm aware, is up and running. And the final issue is a amendment to the Constitution to reflect what are called the coronavirus flexibility regulations. Again, I've already got a draft paper on that. Again, I'll link with Amanda and hopefully we can bring that to members down the line. But it's not a legal requirement as such, because it operates as a matter of law. These are the rules, so we can engage in remote meetings, etc., without having to put that in the Constitution. But as a belt and braces approach, we will now bring the Constitution up to date by incorporating those provisions specifically in it. Other than that, I think that's all really just to give members a brief flavour of what's been going on and what is coming down the line in terms of constitutional review. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Right, so thank you, David. I would suggest Brenda Massey, Vice Chair, you're heading up the Constitution Review Working Group.
Yeah, that's right, Chair.
Okay,
And apologies, I've been you haven't been able to see me on there, but my connection's a bit shaky this afternoon, so I'm trying to save bandwidth. Okay. The only other one that Dave didn't mention was about, we've been looking at the issue about behaviour of people, of the public attending our meetings, and that was raised by Simon. I think it's a really good one, but we haven't got very far with that one yet. But we have got a meeting tomorrow, so there's a possibility of discussing it then. And I'm sure a number of members here will understand exactly what I'm talking about, which is quite tricky to enforce, but I think we do need to have something in there. But it's really interesting going through this. A lot of issues that were raised are already covered in different places anyway. But it is a very interesting piece of work, and I hope by the time we've finished, it'll be a very substantive framework for us to work with moving forward.
Okay,
thank you.
Thank you, Brenda. So may I suggest that this item has just been brought as an update. If members do have any queries on the Constitution, rather than discussing them now, could they forward them on to Brenda?
Yeah, that's
as
fine.
The chair, for the consideration of the committee. Otherwise, we're going to debate something we shouldn't really be debating. We'll be debating it later once their recommendations come forward to us. So, unless there's any pressing need for discussion, I was going to move on to item number 13. Do I see anybody pressing for discussion? Okay,
myself, sorry, Chair, that was myself.
Your leader, that Simon Shilton.
Yes, Chair, thank you. Members, this is really an indication of what's likely to come in future meetings, in particular linked to business planning cycles and key governance decisions that need to be made by the authority. So that gives you an early indication of what is on the agenda at future meetings. Just very quickly, I will point members to first and foremost, page 72 of your report in Appendix 1 of the paper, the Audit, Governance and Ethics Committee, some key areas of papers and decisions to be made at the November meeting. Firstly, the annual governance statement and the final sign-off, the annual statement of accounts and the final statements sign-off of those, and also 1920 final accounts that will be brought forward by the Treasurer for that meeting. That will then, in turn, follow on to the full Fire Authority meeting in December, Some key decisions there for December meeting. The clerk has already mentioned around the hopeful bringing forward the revisions to the Constitution, but there will be a consultation and a review of our corporate plan, which we are currently undertaking at this moment in time, and the outcomes of that will be brought to the authority for approval for any consultation, and then the final accounts there around the sign off of the final accounts. So that's some key decisions for the authority between now and the end of the year, just for noting, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, the forward plan is always for noting, but it does give indication to members of when decisions are going to be made and input into the various committees and officers on those. It is for noting, unless there's anybody that wants to comment. I can't think in chat, so I'm going to assume that we're all okay to note. Is anybody against? Anybody abstaining? Thank you, colleagues. Move on to item 14, which is service delivery risk reduction. Did you want to do item 14 and 15 together, Simon?
Yes,
both information.
Yes, certainly, Chair. I don't propose to go through the full report, but just to pick out some highlights of each of the reports for members' information. So page 75 of your papers, section paragraph 3.9 of paper 14, just to highlight to members there some of the work during COVID over the last few months that we've been undertaking to help and support the educational partners, particularly for children and young people. And we put together some packages for key fire safety messages and asking schools to share them with families as children and young people were undertaking online learning platforms. And as you can see there, some very some highlight figures there, estimated to reached around 6,000 families across our service area, and engaged with over 40 schools within our service area to continue with our safety messages within the community. The next page, on page 76 of your papers, under vulnerable adults, again, just some highlight, some good practice there. Whilst we were obviously undertaking the lockdown, national lockdown, we still continued to undertake some community safety work from that perspective. We have just recently recommenced our face-to-face home fire safety checks as of the 1st of August. Prior to that, the team within the vulnerable adults team were undertaking telephone calls, making contact, particularly focusing on support, social isolation, and just checking in on vulnerable members of our community. I will then move on to page 77 of the report, some more positive interaction with our community. And unfortunately, Councillor Jacobs is unable to join us for the meeting today, but this is out some great work that's been undertaken at Station 18 at Weston-super-Mare. And this is a safety initiative, a road safety initiative, which is entitled Biker Down. And what that is about is obviously Weston-super-Mare, particularly in the summer, attracts a high percentage of motorcyclists. And one particular watch there, Red Watch at Weston-super-Mare, have a number of keen motorcyclists on their watch, and they have worked with partners to develop a road safety package, educational package, to help reduce the number of road traffic collisions involving motorcyclists, but also to help in keeping them safe, to give some advice and some tips there. And that concludes with issuing some small first aid packs, if you like, for motorcyclists to be able to carry with them should they be involved in an incident. That's proven to be hugely popular. So far, we've run 3 sessions during the summer period, 36 participants, range from a number of age ranges from 21 through to late 60s there, so a vast array of age ranges, and that has now attracted ongoing interest for any future courses that are going to be run within that area. So again, just a demonstration of some of the fantastic work in how we are looking after and keeping our community safe in a range of different areas within our communities. Page 78 of your papers, members, under technical fire safety, again in a not dissimilar manner to the work that has been undertaken in other areas of risk reduction. Technical fire safety also undertook during lockdown desktop audits to ensure that we can keep engaged with our communities and businesses, and particularly focusing on care homes. And you can see there in paragraph 3.17, over 350 care homes were contacted, and desktop audits were offered, and discussions were taking place with regards to ensuring that not only they can maintain their responsibilities around a COVID-safe environment, but also that didn't compromise their fire safety in that regard as well. Just a couple of for some historical information for new members. You can see there's reference to the establishment level in technical fire safety. Back in 2018, Pete referenced it earlier on in his HMIC FRS update. We received a cause for concern with regards to our capacity of technical fire safety and our ability to be able to address risk profile across our service. At that time, we had an establishment level of 12 technical fire safety officers. In response to that cause for concern, we undertook a review of the staffing levels of the technical fire safety department. We were able to identify some savings in line to our strategic objective of aligning resources to risk, and we're able to increase the establishment level to 20 full-time funded posts within technical fire safety, with a further additional 4 posts which we funded from other areas of the service and underspends. Those additional 4 posts were put in place whilst a risk-based inspection program was undertaken, or risk-based inspection review, my apologies, risk-based inspection review was undertaken, so that we had a richer picture of our risk profile. And it was referenced earlier on by the Chief Fire Officer in conversations around our response to Grenfell in particular, and high-rise residential buildings. That way we could really then have a more informed picture how we align our resources to risk. And of course, at a previous Fire Authority meeting, I updated members around the funding that we received from central government, in particular the support to technical fire safety, which was in Appendix 3 of the Treasurer's report earlier on. And what that funding has enabled us to do is to continue to fund those posts, which is a positive aspect to be able to continue the support under technical fire safety to our communities. On top of that, in paragraph 3.16 of your report, you will also see there that all building reg submissions are now being completed in line with the legal timeframe of 15 working days. What we're also able to do there is allocate some additional resource to undertake the completion of any backlogs, which was also a finding of the inspectorate in 2018. So some good news stories there, and we've been able to invest in technical fire safety and improve our capacity in those areas. If I then move on, Chair, to paper 15, fires and other incidents. A couple of areas that I'd just like to highlight to members within this paper. So page 81 of your papers. One of the areas from our cultural review was around reward and recognition. I'm pleased to say that working with corporate communications, there's some fantastic work being going on there around various mechanisms to reward and recognise our staff. And we launched a e-recognition platform, which has encouraged staff to thank those who have made a difference and recognise those who bring values to life and our communities. And to date, in its launch over the first few months, we've received only over 150 e-recognition cards, which is shared by staff in recognition of the contribution in their work that they undertake on a day-to-day basis. COVID has also provided us with some some opportunities with regards to technology, and in particular in paragraph 3.3 of the report, you can see there that we have now started to distribute webcams to our whole-time stations. I'm just in the process of distributing webcams to our on-call stations to enable our whole organisation really to interact with each other and engage in business as usual, and also to keep in touch in particular around health and well-being. Which then brings me on to section 3.4 of the report. You can see there that again in recognition of improving our health and well-being offer to our organisation, to our staff, and 5 of our health and well-being spaces have now been created at various locations, and a further 7 more health and well-being spaces are in development. And finally, in 3.7 of the paper, we welcome back 2 staff previously reported at Fire Authority meetings, Assistant Chief Officer Rob Davis and Crew Manager Sarah Hopper, who provided support through their voluntary services under SAR aid and went overseas there to respond to a crisis there with regards to an explosion. And they will be reporting back to a future Fire Authority meeting, in particular, hopefully a future development meeting where they'll be provided a presentation for members, information on their experience and the work that they undertook there. So it's not my intention to steal their thunder, but it'll be an extremely interesting presentation for members to listen into. I will pause there, Chair, for any further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Simon. Are there any questions, comments? I just can't see anything in the chat unless there are any hands up on the screen. Is that hand up Tony Davis? No, Neil Butters? You're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. Three things. Firstly, focusing on Beirut, I'm sure we're all most impressed at the action that was taken, and perhaps we ought to record our thanks formally for the work that was taking place there. Even though I know we have a presentation to come, nonetheless, perhaps we could record our thanks.
Thank you. We can put that in the minutes.
Secondly, members may be aware, Shelley certainly does, that we've had a major adverse incident affecting the River Avon over recent weeks when a sluice gate failed at Twerton. Emergency services were, of course, involved in that. As many as 4 boats were sunk and 44 were left stranded high and dry. I'm just wondering to what degree the fire service may have participated in that.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. We did have a participation. We did have an attendance there to support the boat owners and also those members of the community that live aboard as well. What we were able to do is offer our support in terms of the water rescue capability to help secure boats to make them as safe as possibly could, whilst obviously the water levels were restored to as far as normal as they could do. So we did have an attendance at that incident.
Thank you very much. And lastly, Worley Weir, which the owner is just on the east side of Bath in my ward at Claverton. The owner is pressing for what's called designated bathing water status with DEFRA. If he were to get that, it would be the first inland river, which all sounds absolutely fine. But unfortunately, there are really serious access problems there, which have to be worked out, if they can be worked out at all. I know the AFRS have been looking at possible incidents, how they might react to that. So I'm grateful for that, but just wondering if there's any more to say on that front for the moment.
Thank you, Councillor. Not to moment on that specific incident there. On reference, I believe one of our officers is contacting you, Councillor, with regards to an ability to make contact with local parish councils around opportunities for access in all areas of the river.
Yes, that has been taking place. So thank you for that. We'll keep abreast of that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And just if I may interrupt there, Neil, it would be useful, having been in contact with said gentleman, that we should have a more common approach to wild swimming across the whole of the area, because I have a massive issue in my own ward in relation to that, and the unsuitability thereof for recreational swimming. And I do feel that a common approach across the whole of our area would be really useful in that. So maybe we have sort of discussion offline, but thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to see if there are any other hands up. Any? Okay, I can't see any hands up. I'm going to stick in the chat. Welcome back, Sultan.
Thank you, Chair.
These are for information, so they are for noting, unless there's anybody drastically against and doesn't want to note them. I'm going to assume we're all in favour of them. I can't see item 14 or 15. Anybody actively against? I'm not seeing any in the chat. Okay, thank you, colleagues, and thank you, Simon. Come on to item 16, which is for information, the date of the next meeting. Can I just check with Dave Daycock on that one, please? You're muted, Dave.
Hello, Chair. Hi. Yes, we've got an EGM, I think, next Friday, which is the 9th. But other than that, we might want to insert one for the consideration of the PCC application. But other than that, I think it's the next one then is the 16th of December.
Would it make sense to delay the 9th and have the two together?
I understand I had a chat earlier on with the Chief Fire Officer and Angie, and they both feel the report in question needs to go next week. So I need to do a little bit of work on that probably tonight and tomorrow, and we'll get it up and running so we can consider that next Friday.
Okay, so the next meeting is an extraordinary meeting on the 9th of October, which the papers will be distributed imminently at 3 p.m. That will be on Zoom. So thank you, colleagues, for your attendance, both officers and members of the public who've dialed in. This will also be available on our YouTube channel to watch afterwards. And perhaps on behalf of all the Fire Authority members, I'd like to thank our staff, both firefighters and all our staff in our corporate services and out there, for all the wonderful work they've been doing to keeping the residents and businesses of Avon safe over these past several months. So I know it's been extremely difficult for them, just as much as everybody else, but thank you very much on behalf of us all for the marvellous work you've been doing out in our communities. So thank you, and I wish you all a good afternoon. And Emma will tell us when the recording is finished.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Are we off?
Very much.
We're off. Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.